The Black Sea has been at the center of the Russia-Ukraine war since the invasion began. For Russia, it has always symbolized power and dominance, the place where its warships could roam freely, launching missiles into Ukraine, blockading ports, and projecting strength. For Ukraine, it has been a constant wound, a reminder that their once proud navy had been reduced to almost nothing, and that their coastlines were threatened by ships bristling with weapons. For months, the balance seemed fixed. Russia had the fleet. Ukraine had no ships to match it. But on one extraordinary night, everything changed. In the quiet of Sevastopol, the main Russian naval base in Crimea, ships lay moored in the dark waters. The bay, heavily guarded with radar, anti-air systems, and missile defenses, was supposed to be untouchable. Russian commanders believed that no Ukrainian strike could penetrate this fortress. They had grown confident, even complacent. Crews rotated through their shifts. Sailors leaned on railings smoking cigarettes, and officers monitored the radar screens, expecting nothing but the usual patrols. Yet somewhere inland, far from Sevastopol's calm, Ukraine was preparing a storm. In a makeshift command room, Ukrainian drone operators sat before glowing screens. The air buzzed with tension. Rows of sleek, explosive-laden drones were lined up like silent predators waiting for release. Routes were already mapped across the sea, paths calculated to slip beneath Russian radar. Each drone carried a deadly payload, small enough to escape detection, but powerful enough to cripple a warship. But the drones alone would not be enough. That night, Ukraine had prepared something larger, something bolder. On airfields scattered across the region, the thunder of helicopter rotors filled the night sky. 50 aircraft were readied. Mi-8s, Mi-24s, and others armed with rockets, missiles, and heavy machine guns. Pilots strapped into their cockpits. Engines roared. Blades cut through the dark, and the helicopters lifted into formation. The plan was audacious. Drones would swarm Sevastopol first, distracting and overwhelming defenses, while the helicopters swept in low to deliver precise, devastating strikes against Russian ships and shore defenses. It was not just a raid, it was a siege. Shortly after midnight, the first drones launched. They skimmed the waves at frighteningly low altitude, their engines humming like insects. Invisible to radar until almost too late, they slipped into the black horizon toward the Russian fleet. In the control rooms at Sevastopol, Russian operators began noticing strange blips. At first, they assumed it was noise, clutter, false signals. But the blips multiplied. The realization came too late. The first explosion tore through the night. A Ukrainian drone slammed into the side of a Russian landing ship, erupting in a ball of fire. Sailors shouted in panic, scrambling for fire hoses, alarms blaring across the harbor. Before they could respond, another drone struck a corvette at anchor, ripping open its hull. Flames rose high into the air, illuminating the water with a hellish glow. Anti-aircraft guns immediately roared to life, spitting streams of tracers across the bay. The sky lit up as searchlights swept desperately, trying to find the attackers, but the drones came in fast, zigzagging, darting unpredictably. They struck again and again, their small frames too quick for the heavy defenses meant to stop missiles and jets. And then, over the horizon, came the next wave. Ukrainian helicopters swept in from the east, flying low and fast, their blades thundering against the sea air. To Russian radar, they were ghosts until they were almost upon the fleet. By the time alarms screamed through the harbor, the helicopters were already in range. In a synchronized strike, rockets unleashed from dozens of pylons streaked into shore batteries, smashing radar and air defense positions. Other helicopters fired guided missiles directly at warships struggling to escape the chaos. One missile slammed into the deck of a Russian frigate, igniting secondary explosions as ammunition aboard cooked off. Another carved into a command post overlooking the bay, engulfing it in flames and silencing radios mid-command. The harbor became a vision of chaos. Smoke and fire swallowed the night sky. Warships, desperate to maneuver, collided in the narrow waters. A patrol vessel clipped the stern of a larger frigate as both tried to escape, gouging steel and sending sailors sprawling. Some ships opened fire blindly, shooting at shadows and even at their own drones. Anti-aircraft batteries unleashed volleys, but the sheer number of targets overwhelmed them. Explosions rippled across the docks as fuel depots ignited, sending columns of fire into the heavens. Civilians in Sevastopol awoke to the thunder. Windows rattled, car alarms blared, and the skyline glowed orange as if the city itself was on fire. From apartment balconies, residents filmed the impossible. Swarms of Ukrainian drones darting across the bay, while helicopters streaked low, unleashing rocket salvos into Russian defenses. Videos quickly spread across social media, showing warships engulfed in flames, tracer fire crisscrossing the sky, and desperate Russian sailors leaping from decks into the water to escape the infernos. Hour by hour, the battle ground on. Ukraine had committed to a full assault, and Russian defenses were stretched thin. Landing ships were disabled. A missile corvette was sinking by its bow. A frigate listed heavily, its crew desperately trying to pump out seawater. Commanders onshore tried to regain control, but with communication centers burning, orders were fragmented. Some batteries fired wildly, while others went silent entirely. Even as Russia scrambled fighter jets to intervene, Ukrainian helicopters hugged the terrain, ducking below radar, vanishing into the smoke, before reappearing to launch another devastating strike. By dawn, the true scale of the attack was visible. Sevastopol Bay was a graveyard of steel. Smoke plumed from multiple ships. At least one vessel had sunk outright, slipping beneath the waves in the early light. Others were gutted, blackened husks, still afloat, but useless for combat. Fuel depots were still burning, painting the sky with thick black columns. Docks were shattered, and the once orderly harbour was littered with debris and wreckage. Satellite imagery later confirmed the devastation. At least half a dozen Russian warships had been disabled or destroyed. Ammunition depots were scorched. Critical infrastructure along the harbour was wrecked. What Russia had believed to be an impenetrable fortress had been torn open in a single night of coordinated firepower. The strategic impact was immediate. The Black Sea Fleet, once Russia's symbol of dominance, was forced to retreat eastward, scattering vessels to ports far from Ukraine's reach. The blockade of Ukrainian ports, already under strain, suddenly looked fragile. Global observers were stunned that Ukraine, with no traditional navy, had managed to cripple Russia's fleet with drones and helicopters, cobbled together through ingenuity and foreign support. It was asymmetric warfare at its finest, small, cheap machines defeating billion-dollar warships. For Russia, it was humiliation. State media tried to downplay the scale, claiming only minor damage, but the images spoke louder than words. Flames, wrecks, and satellite photos told the truth. The Black Sea Fleet was no longer safe in Sevastopol. For Ukraine, it was a triumph, a demonstration not only of resilience, but of innovation. They had turned the tide in a theatre of war where they were never supposed to stand a chance. The lesson reverberated far beyond Crimea. Military analysts across the world pointed to the battle as proof that naval warfare had changed forever. The age of invulnerable steel giants ruling the seas without challenge was over. Drones and small strike craft had rewritten the rules. Cheap, fast, expendable weapons could cripple the most advanced fleets if used with creativity and coordination. Every navy in the world was now on notice. The night the drones and helicopters struck Sevastopol will be remembered not just as a victory for Ukraine, but as the moment the balance of naval warfare shifted. The Russian fleet, once feared and respected, had been forced into hiding. The Black Sea itself was no longer a Russian stronghold, but a battlefield where even the mightiest ships had to fear the buzz of a drone in the dark. As the sun rose over the smouldering bay, the survivors of the Russian fleet counted their losses, and the world understood something new about this war. Ukraine had shown that strength does not always come from size. It comes from ingenuity, courage, and the will to strike when the enemy least expects it. The war in Ukraine was far from over, but on that night, the world saw that even giants can bleed. And with that, a new era began. An era where drones, helicopters, and human determination reshaped the seas and proved that no fortress is truly beyond reach. If you believe the world should know about this historic strike, Make sure to share this video, hit like, and subscribe for more updates on the Russia-Ukraine war. Your support helps us bring the truth of the battlefield straight to you.